Welcome back. This is Sarah with Cowlitz River Restoration, and today I am going to show you how I'm going to refinish this desk slash vanity. So it's been sitting in my storage for forever, and I decided to unclog my garage and get this bad boy out so that I can refinish it and try to flip it on the marketplace. So stay tuned and you'll get to see my step-by-step on how I'm going to do that. First, I'm going to use a 120, then a 220, then a 320 to sand down the top. I used an orbital sander with the 120 at first, but it was taking so long that I decided to switch to another sander that I have, a belt sander with a 120 grit sandpaper on that. Now this belt sander, did a great job, like such a great job that it went all the way through the veneer. So where I thought that I was just going to sand it and then just stain it, I ended up having to do some repair work. So I first went through with my 120, then I went over it with my 220, then I went over it with my 320 to get it really nice and soft and ready for stain. Then, of course, I've got to wipe off all that debris before I put my stain on. So I wiped it off with a wet rag, then dried it off. Here's where I'm going to show you where my sanding went through the veneer a little bit, and I'm going to have to try to mask that with my stain, and also I'll do a black wash. So this is the stain I used, and it was Special Walnut. I use gloves when I'm working with stain because I love myself. I use the pour and wipe method. I just oftentimes use an old rag. It could be an old t-shirt. It could even be like an old pair of underwear that belonged to one of my children that they outgrew and hardly wore. I mean, obviously I'm not wiping fecal matter onto the pieces, but old cloth, just reuse that. I did a black wash on the top. I hadn't originally planned on doing a black wash, but after I went through the veneer, my options were pretty limited. So I did a black wash. I do it a little bit different in my technique. I sort of flip my brush back and forth depending on the type of brush stroke that I want it to have. And then I just sort of play with it. Lots of happy trees. I like to use different shapes and triangles and sweeping motions as paint and wipe. The cool thing about this is if something goes on or I don't like the way that it's going on, I can always sand it back down. It's a no pressure situation. So as my top is drying, I'm going to remove all the hardware so that I can clean it and get it ready for paint, because I want the hardware to look new but also be old, because the hardware actually is super awesome. I love the shape of it. I like the way that it goes with the piece, but I just wanted to freshen it up a bit. So I wiped it all down with a vinegar rinse, and then I used a metallic bronze paint. I put that on the front, and then I let it dry for 24 hours, flipped it over, and painted it again. And then, of course, let that dry. Then I went through and I sanded the top with a 320 grit sandpaper super lightly. Like I'm applying the lightest of pressure, just enough to make it super soft. And then I went over it with a wet rag, and then I dried it so that I can put on my matte polyurethane, water-based. I did 2 coats of this polyurethane. When applying polyurethane, I always like to go in the direction of the wood grain. I have made the mistake of not doing that in the past, and it looks very unnatural, and I won't make that mistake again. Unless that's the look you're going for, then do you. I wiped down the body of the piece after that, and then I needed to use some plastic wood filler to fill in some of the brad nail holes from when it was fixed. After that dries, it dries pretty quick, but still let it dry. Then I went through and I sanded it down with the 320 and then vacuumed around it so I have a clean workspace to put this vintage yellow chalk paint made by Behr. So you can get Behr chalk paint at Home Depot. They can tint it to basically any color that you want. I chose this vintage yellow, and it was really fun to work with. The inspiration for this yellow was actually my grandmother. She had a Vanity that was refinished very similarly to this one with the yellow and then the dark wood top. So it was fun to use this color, and it really just kind of jived my heart. I did 3 coats of this color using a paintbrush onto this Vanity. I probably could have gotten away with doing 2 coats, but I wanted to make sure that my coverage was very good. I wanted very good coverage, no signs of brush strokes or anything like that. I was a little concerned when I didn't do a primer that I would have bleed through. Typically when I do like colors like this, I like to do a primer, but I was feeling a little bit rebellious, I would say, and decided like, hey, you know what, I'm just gonna go for it. And I didn't have any bleed through whatsoever. The coverage was really good, and I am really pleased with how it turned out. That is not to say that next time I will not use a primer, because I am not always quite so rebellious, but this one I got lucky. It was a gamble. I used an angle brush for the entire thing. There was a lot of cutting in, there was a lot of nooks and crannies, and this angle brush worked really well for me because I couldn't take the drawers out. I tried taking the drawers out, but then I was afraid that once I finished them and trying to put them back in, it was just going to dig up my paint, so I left them in. And this angle brush was great at getting at all those little nooks and crannies without bleeding out into areas that I didn't want paint. And I am so happy with these brushes. They're wonderful, and they're not super expensive, so I'm not out a bunch of money on them. After the 3 coats were completely dried, I went over this with a Minwax soft wax. Soft touch, soft wax. Soft touch. It's soft touch. Is it soft touch? Let me look. Minwax soft touch finishing wax. I love this product. It's not for everyone. Some people don't like the smell of it. I don't even smell it anymore because I've become completely nose blind to it. But I love the durability of it. I first bought this for a wood piece, but I've used it on paint since, and again, I am super pleased with the finish and the quality. I even put it on the top a little bit just to add a little more durability, because again, you can put it on wood, you can put it on paint. It is great. Then I took a rag and I wiped it down just to make sure that all the excess was off. Here's me trying to put on the knobs. Like, they came with a nail and it fell off. This was a frustrating situation. It came with nails, so I had to nail the little pieces back on, but I didn't want to scuff the paint. It all turned out fine. There was a couple times where I had to walk away and do breathing exercises, but all the hardware got on and everything turned out good. Nothing got scratched or dinged, and it was great. So this was the before piece. I've had it in my storage forever. I'm so glad that I finally refinished it, and this is the end result of my desk transformation. That's right, I said transformation, and I'll say it again. In my last video, somebody gave me a hard time for saying transformation 2 times, so I'm just going to say transformation at least 3 more times. This is my desk transformation, and I'm pleased with how it turned out. I'm trying to flip it in the Facebook Marketplace, so I'm hoping that a client or a future customer will see it and think that it's super awesome. I've got it listed for $250, so hopefully it goes for my selling price. We will see. More will be revealed. Thanks so much for checking it out. I hope that you'll like and subscribe, and that I'll get to see you next time. Bye.